to another episode of the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of FinStrat Management. Really excited because with us today, we have joining us from Copenhagen, Denmark, Lena Marijke-Wenzel, who's an Innovation Program Manager. Lena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Kristian.
So I know you have a lot going on today, but why don't we start with what's been your focus in the last couple of months?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Yeah, I'm working for EIT Food, specifically the RisingFoodStars Scale-Up program. And over the last few months, we've been really busy with scouting new companies for our new cohort that's going to launch in June this year. And yeah, so doing a lot of due diligence basically on those.
Great. What's the focus of the program?
Yes, awesome. At EIT Food, we work basically in the food system. We identified the three most crucial challenges to solve, let's say. And so we work with those as missions. And so here we focus primarily on healthier lives through food. We focus on a net zero food system, and then also on a fully transparent, fair, and resilient food system. And so also within RisingFoodStars, it is our scale-up program. It is one actually of three of our flagship entrepreneurship programs. We work with the latest stage companies. And so any of our companies that we support in that program has to basically fulfill one of those challenges.
And so do you find that's more food technologies that are supporting production, or is it food producers who are just coming at the market with new and innovative ways to bring groceries to people's markets?
Yes, so we both work with food tech and ag tech, as we call it. And here, because of EIT, EIT stands for the European Institute of Technology. And so what we work with is quite IP heavy. So we don't work with the usual B2C consumer apps, though I'm sure there's great solutions out there, but what we really focus on is more of a tech heavy focus, right? And tech heavy doesn't have to be only AI, machine learning, all of the deep tech, whatever you can find, but it can also be ingredients, right? So we work a lot with the ingredient manufacturers, for example, biostimulants for agriculture and so on.
Okay. And how long has the program been operating?
So we've been running since 2018.
Wow. And how long have you been involved with the program?
Yeah, I've only joined last year, actually. Quite excited about that, but I've had quite a track record in terms of innovation management within different industries. But yeah, about 3 years ago, I decided to go fully on the food system because I'm personally really interested in that. And I also feel like the food system is an industry that really needs any fighting hand, basically, that it can get.
Okay. And then over the course of the last year, would love to know what your focus has been and maybe some of the successes that you've had with the program.
Yeah, sure. So our program runs, well, we don't really call it a program, to be honest, because it's much more of a community. Everybody knows the typical incubators and accelerators, right? There's a lot of trainings going on. There is lots of pitches going on and so on. But the companies that we work with, they're later stage, right? So we work with pre-Series A companies that are basically ready to scale commercially. That also means that the focus and the support they need is very different, right? Because it's not a startup anymore. They're basically getting out of their startup shoes and becoming a real company, let's say. And so what we do is we onboard only 15 new companies each year, but companies can stay with us for up to 3 years. So they don't have to, so they can drop out at every year, basically. But a lot of companies do stay longer with us because what we offer is basically like a menu of options, pretty much personalized to them also. And then they can basically pick and choose what they need in their current stage, right? Whether that's investment readiness for their Series A round, or that's really a push on visibility and getting exposure to corporates and potential partners. So we basically support on those aspects.
And I heard go ahead, please.
No, you go ahead.
And I heard, so it sounds like there's one cohort a year. Does it last all 12 months or is it a fraction of the year?
Yeah, so we start every year in June, July with the new cohort. And so first renewal, basically, we call it, is in December every year, right? So technically you could already drop out after half a year if you decide it's not for you anyways. But most of our companies stay on average 2 years with us. And then you can renew every December, basically.
All right. And I think I heard that EIT will also facilitate financing.
Yes, as EIT Food, we do have a few financing opportunities. So just because of being part of RisingFoodStars doesn't grant you any funding per se. So we're not a funding vehicle like that. But we do have, for example, our own, we call it EIT Impact Fund, basically operates as a VC. And they invest in companies that are part of EIT Food. So that's a prerequisite. And they invest anything up to 1.5 million euros per company, usually starting with about 500,000 euros.
Okay. And then I also heard that in addition to potential financial support, there's also a menu of options they can choose. So what are some of those options that companies have available to them?
Do you mean financing options or other types of support?
Other types of support.
Yeah, sure. What we do also offer trainings, right? Because we basically scan our cohort in the beginning once they start to really understand what are their needs, what are their gaps also in terms of commercialization. And then we customize the program offerings basically to our cohort. And so there are trainings that are covering general needs of our companies that can be anything from very specific marketing or PR support, right? How do you launch such campaigns, for example, to increasingly nowadays also anything focused on AI, right? So how do you, for example, AI for productivity, right? What everybody talks about, but also AI for sales and marketing and so on. What we then do as well is we have one-on-one mentorship support for the more, personal challenges, let's say, of each company. We have a wide network of mentors across Europe, also actually beyond Europe, who help on all sorts of different areas, right? Sales, marketing, also legal regulatory aspects, because that's really specific and interesting in the food system. So we have those things, but then what we also do is, of course, EIT is actually the largest network of food system actors in Europe. So we have a incredible network of corporate partners, of research institutions, of startups, and basically any actor that's active in the food system in Europe. And we facilitate contact between all of those actors, right, on projects that we work on together, but also through, for example, all sorts of events that we host ourselves, but also that we actively attend and facilitate, right? For example, we have our Next Bite event, we call it. It's every year in October. I think this year it's in Brussels, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a huge networking event, right? Like our entire community comes together, and that's really where people also gain contacts, right? Our startups also gain the corporate contacts, the investor contacts that we have. So that's also something that we facilitate and really support. And then last point is also specifically visibility and credibility in the ecosystem. Of course, we have our own media channels, which we use and leverage to support our companies on, but we also do one-on-one training and support for our companies to also get their media strategy up and running, because that's getting increasingly important, right?
Fantastic. So I know a lot of companies that help other businesses will publish a list of needs or challenges. Is that something that the program does?
Yes. So are you talking about basically corporate venturing services in that sense now?
Not necessarily. I was thinking more along the lines of, in the United States, Y Combinator, probably one of the more popular accelerators in the country. And in advance of each cohort, they'll publish a list of problems or challenges that they're currently focused on, and then encourage applicants to submit interest because they're solving those problems. Curious whether or not that's something that you guys are focused on or incorporate into your program.
Yeah, I guess to a degree, it's not like we focus on a specific challenge each year, but as EIT Food, we work on these three main challenges in the food system, right? The ones on, healthier lives through food, net zero food system, and then fully transparent, fair, and resilient food system. And within those, we also have sub-themes, let's say, that are more specific, because those are obviously very broad terms, right? And so our companies have to fulfill one of those, right? So that could be something along the line of protein diversification. It could be about food as medicine, right? That's also an area that's really strongly increasing in popularity right now. We also have sub-themes on packaging and labeling and those aspects, right? So it's not a specific challenge, but like across those three challenges, basically.
Okay. And I inferred from what I was listening to is that the focus from a geography perspective is Europe, or do you guys go into Asia or Africa or other parts of the world as well?
Yeah, good question. As EIT, the name already suggests, we mostly operate in Europe, though our companies have to be registered in the European Union or in Horizon Europe associated countries. So that's a mouthful, but there is a list online, right? So other countries, I think what's like North Macedonia and so on are also included. So that's what we focus on in terms of the companies that we support. But in terms of also market expansion, we actually go global. For example, last year we had one project basically where we took a few of our companies to the US. They really liked it, especially the food tech companies, and they basically got introductions to ecosystem players, got some trainings also, and so on. So we do that, and there's also other countries that we facilitate that type of market visits to, let's say.
Fantastic. Now, say up front that tech is generally my wheelhouse, but ag and food less. That said, I would tell you that I understand that both the EU and the US have different opinions on food manufacturing and preparation. That's about where my education on the subject ends, but would love your perspective. Is that a real consideration?
Mm, a real consideration, as in like the differences between the US and the EU, or?
Yes.
Um, No, it hasn't crossed my work so far, I have to say. We do also still work primarily in the EU, right? So that's also where we
Sure.
strive. Actually, as EIT Food, we are also a body of the European Union, right? So we're co-funded by the EU. That's pretty much our focus, right? And we also push for a lot of policy development, basically, in that area.
Okay.
Mhm.
Would love to understand your career, how it's progressed, and how it led you to EIT.
Yeah, fun question. I think I have quite of an unusual background. So I come from anthropology originally, actually. So
Okay.
quite a different path, but then really went into innovation management from day one on. So worked both in startups and scale-ups, but also mostly in supporting roles to startups. I built an accelerator from the ground up here in the Nordics, supporting all sorts of different startups, not very food system focused actually. And then I also worked in the coatings industry of all places and building a corporate incubator for the company basically. And in that, we also work with startups and we facilitated a lot of open innovation as well. So always this innovation management focus, always facilitating innovation basically and mediating and helping out. And then, yeah, as I said, in the last 3 years, I really wanted to focus more on food tech and the food system. And I've been doing that both working directly with startups and scale ups, helping them basically to scale their products, but then also now, most recently, with EIT Food in the scale up program.
And during your time that you built Accelerator and run this corporate incubator, what was some of the biggest takeaways that you learned over time?
Yeah. So that's actually interesting. So much to talk about there. I think the corporate world and also then the startup world are quite different as such, right? Corporate world, right? I have N equals 2 experience, so I can't generalize on my experience here. But what I can say is that corporates are big ships, right? So they're really hard to navigate, and you really have to be strategic about how do you facilitate change also, right? Specifically in the corporate that I worked in, innovation was something that R&D departments did. It was nothing that the strategy department did all of a sudden and infiltrated basically R&D here, right? So there's a lot of also human focus and a lot of how do you take people with you on that journey of change and innovation. So yeah, surprisingly, my background in anthropology helps me every single day because it just allows me to also understand the human piece in all of the technologies that we're working with.
And so did you find it was really challenging to bridge or connect interests between founders who were looking to innovate and corporate interests?
Um, It depends. So I think there is always a little bit of, like a lot actually, of mediation going on. So I think if you understand the interests of both all parties involved, like the corporates and then the startups, let's say in a very simplified world, right? If you understand their needs, then you can also more easily map and address the synergies that there might be and help facilitate across that. We did already in our first year of existence of the corporate incubator, we already did facilitate startup interaction, right? But it's always about, is there a match, right? Because startups, especially the younger they are, they often have a very, yeah, wishful thinking about how to interact with corporates, right? They're basically just cool, we just have to pitch and they will love our product. But that's just not how the world works. Corporates also have their agendas, they also have budgets, they have processes, right? And even if they really want to engage with the company, there might be bureaucratic hurdles that keep them from it, right? So there's a lot to understand in the dynamics of how corporates work. And those are obviously really hard for startups to engage with, right? Because even if they wanted to know all of the things, even if they really wanted to understand how corporates work, they often have difficulty getting the access to that.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. Albeit secondhand, but I have heard about another accelerator program in the US where in part of their pursuit to remain profitable, they engage corporate sponsors. But eventually I understand that they no longer reach out to corporations because there was just a difference of opinion between what the corporate entity wanted and what the founder thought was best for the market. But it sounds like that challenge is not unique to the US, but it also sounds like you may have been able to figure out how to better connect founders with the organizations that have a specific budget, agenda, timeline.
Yeah, I don't know if we've cracked the nut on that one, but we do have teams within EIT Food that can facilitate, right? And EIT Food is really a powerhouse. I'm always just so impressed by how well everything works and how engaged everybody is. It's really incredible to see. And for example, we do have a specific team that's working with corporate venturing, right? So they basically present the corporates. They have a large network of all the corporates, and they really work with understanding, okay, what do corporates mean? What do they need? What are their challenges? And then they also launch, for example, challenges that startups can work with, right? Or they then also actively scout startups from also EIT Food that would facilitate the challenge of that specific corporate. So that's one bit, but then we of course also host consortium-based projects with corporates, with research institutions, with startups. So we really facilitate a lot of interaction and a lot of network building basically within the food system, because it's all about people and it's all about pushing that ship forward together, right? Because you can't just have only startups because they just won't be able to disrupt the system, right? So you need everybody else on board as well.
On the flip side, are there any common pitfalls that you've seen over the years in the support space?
Specifically for the companies that we work with, right? As I said, it's pre-Series A companies that are basically, becoming real businesses, right? They are no longer startups. They also don't want to be talked to as startups anymore. They are scaling, they are growing significantly. And one of the challenges there is also to manage that growth, right? Because what do you do if you all of a sudden have 50 employees when you're only used to having 5, right? So you need to professionalize your business basically, right? You need to set up HR departments all of a sudden. Also, you as a founder, right? You're not a founder anymore. You're basically becoming a leader, a CEO. That's a switch that people also just have to do and sometimes miss to do correctly. And then also a little bit of, we got our first sales, we know how this works, right? But then maybe you don't, right? Because now we have also been talking about corporates, right? But every corporate is also very different, right? Of course, you can generalize bits and pieces, right? But it's about understanding those nuances, basically.
Interesting. So today, in the last 12 months, what does your normal day-to-day look like for purposes of nurturing innovation?
Yeah. The last couple of months have actually been very unusual because, we've been scouting most of the time for our new cohort. But so when that is not happening, what we do is we organize our trainings and workshops. We also have specialized side tracks, let's say, that is for even fewer companies, usually about 6 companies, on a very specific topics, and it's very hands-on, very intense training on that topic.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of like trainer scouting as well to see who would be the best to help our companies forward. We do a lot of mentorship setup, so we're reworking our entire mentorship scheme at the moment as well. So a lot of work on that. And then also organizing some of the events that we're hosting both in person and also online, and then facilitating with the entire EIT Food ecosystem and trying to bring the best services to our startups.
Fantastic. The subject innovation, I'm curious, everyone's different. Some people are a bit more creative than others, but in your experience, are there trainings or approaches that you can take to tease innovation out of founders in the process?
I've actually not come across that challenge yet. So I do think that most of the founders that we work with, they are quite creative and innovative in that sense, especially I think in food tech and ag tech, which is maybe unique, or at least, yeah, I think it's a little bit unique to that industry. Most companies come out of R&D, right? So you have a very heavy R&D focused companies usually that then all of a sudden have to become sales organizations, right? So I think it's rather the opposite challenge, that you have rather creative, inventive people who then all of a sudden need to professionalize themselves.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask you to now forecast a little bit for us. So as you look ahead over the coming years, are there any trends in particular that have your attention and that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I'm personally really excited about anything that's going on in the, let's say, personalized nutrition space, right? Or anything that's related to microbiome research, I think is really exciting. And I think that's also something that the industry reflects, which is nice. So lots for me to be interested in. And then there is a lot going on also in terms of regen ag, so regenerative agriculture I'm using terms I can hear myself. So regenerative agriculture, there's a lot going on also in terms of soil health and biodiversity. And those two topics actually go together, right? Because it's all about the microbiota, basically, right? Both inside our guts, but also in the soil. And how do we really create a system that works for both, right? Because at the end of the day, we might end up in a system where we can't grow. We might be able to grow crops, but they might not. They might be depleted of nutrients if we don't fix our soil, because all of the nutrients that are in our crops and that subsequently are in our meat come originally from the soil, right? So we really need to find solutions on how to nurture that soil and not let it die.
I love it. You made me think about something, and it probably could be an entire podcast in on itself, but the thought you gave me was you have a lot of different nations in the world who are devoted to this subject, but arguably everyone has a common interest, and that's taking care of the earth. I would love to know, how often do you find that there's cross-continent collaboration?
Interesting. I actually do feel like there is quite a bit. So I also worked in EU-funded projects before, or currently I'm also too. And there is a lot of cross-continent work going on, specifically a lot with African countries, but also with Asia. With the US, I actually haven't come across so many projects, I have to say. I wonder if that's just my bias or general industry.
Yeah, again, a bit outside my wheelhouse, but late last year I had the opportunity to listen to a presentation from a representative from John Deere, which is a large agricultural company in the US. And I admit I didn't know half the things that the company was focused on, but a significant portion of it was ag tech. And oh my gosh, it puts a smile on your face at the end of the day to know that there's some pretty smart people focused on the food supply chain and thinking about ways of how we can take care of it and also increase production without compromising nutrients and the foods that we're putting in our system. Lena, it's been a great podcast. Before we wrap up, one of the questions I love to ask is, if you had an opportunity to go back and talk to yourself at the beginning of your career, what would you share?
Oh, interesting question. What would I share? I think I would just say that I should just follow my interests. And as long as I follow my interests and do that with a lot of motivation behind it, opportunities will pop up, right? I really believe in that.
Fantastic. Love it. Lena, if there's anyone who wants to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. So Lena Marijke-Wenzel with a, yeah, it's not the easiest name for the US citizens out there, but LinkedIn is a good way. And yeah, otherwise through the EIT Food website, RisingFoodStars, there's also our emails on the website.
Fantastic. Lena Marijke-Wenzel, Innovation Program Manager. Lena, thank you for the great podcast. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you too.
Yeah, and this has been another episode of the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of FinStrat Management. Kristian Marquez here. Thank you so much for listening to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. If you are a successful founder or an investor who would like to be on the podcast, please visit podcast.finstratmgmt.com/podcast-guest. If you've got something out of this interview, please share this episode on social media. If you know someone that would be a great guest, please tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Innovators and Investors. I'd love to see your posts and suggestions. We're regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you catch each new episode, please subscribe to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. And your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show, and it means a lot to me and my team. Would you like to know more? Go to our website, finstratmgmt.com, or follow us on LinkedIn or on X. Our handle is @FinstratMGMT. This is Kristian Marquez. Thank you for listening. Until next time.